Hey, what's up, Canada and beyond? Welcome back. It's Tuesday, June 4th. Do you know what all the clowns are up to? Please give this a like, subscribe, and a share. This is a definitely a symbiotic environment. What I do can't work without you, and I like to think that my work helps you work. So it's kind of a quid quo pro quo kind of deal here. So, folks, we're going to cover a lot of miles today. Again, a little bit. We're going to pick up on a couple of things that we touched on yesterday, but it's going to be a whirlwind through the geopolitical shenanigans and tomfoolery and clownery that is going on. uh, Tomorrow night, we're going to have a guest again. We're going to be doing a special on MAID in Canada and why our government seems to be stuck on murder. So we're going to have Michelle Smith join us tomorrow evening for that. We're going to get right down into the nitty gritty and the science of it, right down even to the chemical concoctions that they're using to pretend that they are doing humanity and everybody a service, and how they are selling this. This is kind of a follow up to the article that we covered last night, where the CBC published an article saying that two-thirds of Canadians are suffering from trauma. Well, Michelle and I both agree that it's far more than that. More likely, 90 to 95% of Canadians are suffering some form of measurable trauma. But why they're talking about it, that's the scary part, the terrifying part. We have a government. As we showed last night, our health system refuses to treat somebody for Lyme disease, but okays them for deletion. We have an entire system that is literally stuck on murder. So we're going to be it's going to be a tough one to listen to tomorrow, folks. But I think it's a conversation that we have to keep having. We have to be pushing this conversation. Murder should not be the solution to anything, and no government should have a part in that, or legitimizing that, and let alone driving everybody to want that as what seems like the only alternative. That's kind of why our liberal government, our establishment, oh, that's a whole other story. We're going to get into some of the reasons why our government and establishment is so messed up. But I really wanted to get that out there about tomorrow's guest, Michelle. Everybody, she's been on here multiple times, and it makes waves when she comes on and discusses things, because she has the expertise and the credentials to say the things that nobody else is qualified to say. And the abuse of our system and the legacy media is off the hook. So when I sent her that article yesterday, she says it's time again, guys. So chime in on one of the chats wherever you guys are hanging out from or watching this show from. Like to think that it's still getting out there. This used to be an international show where we had people tuned in from all over the world to join us, but with the shenanigans of our current tyrannical psychopathic establishment, they are making that next to near impossible for us to be shared. Again, there's no streams on Facebook at all anymore. For days now, I've been trying, and there's seems to be no appeasing or getting back onto Facebook. So now this is as frustrating as it might seem. Imagine what it's like for us content creators. We have been trying to warn people for years that this was going to happen. They're going to silence us. They're going to cancel us on these platforms, and one day it will be permanent. And to this day, I still cannot get people to leave Facebook and get connected or plugged in on one of the other platforms that you'll find in the show description. We're working on platforms with allies when it comes to platforms like Wimkin, LGM, What's Up Canada, Liberty is another great social alternative, Canadian made. But guys, we have got to get off of these platforms. Hello from Kenora and Rocky Mountain House. We've got a couple of provinces in the house here tonight. So far, the numbers are way down, but I guess that means you guys all stand a much better likelihood of getting your comments shown. So if you've got something to say or something to follow up on, this is what I'm hoping here, guys. I'm going to be um, touching on some issues that are going to be ongoing stories and issues, and some of it on occasions. I'm just going to be dropping a seed out there so that people can have some time to get some feedback. They'll send me more information. They'll send me more articles. They'll send me more documents. Those kinds of things. So if you're going to see some additions or a follow up on some stories. So this is one of the reasons why I'm trying to get a little bit more consistent and regular in doing this. So it's going to be same time, same place, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Central, 5 Mountain, 4 Pacific, 7 Eastern, and halfway through the night on the East Coast. But the idea is to get people working together and continuing on some of the things that we can inform each other about, and then collaborate towards greater expansion of knowledge, or perhaps an more active role in some things. So great to see a few more people popping in. Victoria, BC, beautiful out there. Cornwall, Ontario, Toronto, the heart of the beast. Good to see you there. Nova Scotia, awesome. So looks like we've got coast to coast in Canada. So again, like, subscribe, and share, folks, and we will get into things. I'm going to start off with a friendly neighbor reminder of where some of your clowns are hanging out this week. We touched on this a little bit last night with Mr. Carnegie and the other fella that are over in at the Bilderberg in Madrid. The 70th Bilderberg meeting taking place from 30th of May to the 2nd of June in Madrid, Spain. As ever, a diverse group of political leaders and experts from industry, finance, academia, labor, and the media has been invited. The list of participants is available on, and I have got that pulled up here as well. But yeah, so this list comes from this page, their own page and platform. But one of the reasons why I wanted to pull this up and touch on it again, we can't let these guys forget that we now know what they are up to. And this is going to tie into what I'm going to dive even deeper into with the foreign interference and meddling. This, in my estimation, until proven otherwise, will be seen as foreign intervention, foreign meddling. This is when they're over there discussing AI safety, the changing faces of biology, climate, future of warfare, geopolitical landscape, Europe's economic challenges, U.S. economic challenges, U.S. political landscape, Ukraine and the world, Middle East, China, Russia, blah, 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 blah. None of it has any damn thing to do with Canadian governance and or will of the people. But these are the clowns that are see themselves as being the ones to govern and steer the world. And this is how we actually end up in situations like this. And this was kind of a two-parter here, but I found this. I mean, initially I had found the conversation, but I wanted to add Tamara's little expression on this, her retweet on this. She's still banned from downtown Ottawa, still has no contact orders with good friends Danny and Tom, still banned from exercising rights of free speech and assembly, still banned from moving away from her current address. Her surety still has to check her devices to make sure she's being a good girl. They called me, she says here, but this basically applies to all of us. They called us all racists, terrorists, criminals, ideologically motivated, violent extremists, and a danger to society. And yes, her and Chris are currently enduring the longest mischief trial of all time. Why is our government so hell bent on that? In on persecuting anybody that disagrees. Well, we're going to hear from. Well, I've got it pulled up here. Da-da, da-da. This is the one.
You've talked about the attacks on democracy, and it's already been talked about that Canadians have lost confidence in our electoral system and our institutions, in part because of this foreign interference debate. Are you not concerned that by not releasing the names of the MPs who are involved and accused of what this committee is accusing them of, that you are further undermining confidence in the system? And why are we affording them that protection?
So let me just start by saying I don't think Canadians have lost confidence in our democracy.
Anybody else want to argue that or challenge that statement, that determination? Canadians have not lost faith in our democracy. That'll tie in a little bit more later on. Again, let me carry on.
Are Canadians concerned by foreign interference in Canada, by efforts to interfere in our democracy? Absolutely. And they should be. And I am too, and our government is as well. The fact that we are having this conversation, the fact that a cross-party committee has done this work, a cross-party committee convened by the Prime Minister has done this work and published this work, is a really important part of strengthening our democracy. And this is just one of many steps we've taken already in terms of strengthening our rules against foreign interference and the authorities we have to fight it. And, we are going to keep on going.
Like suing the House to keep documents sealed, like silencing all independent media asking questions. They've taken a lot of steps, haven't they?
I do also want to emphasize for us all, this is a new and different threat from what Canada has experienced in the past. That's why we need new tools.
Not according to CSIS. This is not different. This has been going on for years and years and years and years and years. We can actually document it going back to Trudeau Sr. So more garbage from a worn-out hag.
And that is why our government is putting new tools in place. But we are very, very seized of this issue, even as we respect the rules that are in place when it comes to law enforcement and when it comes to confidentiality of security information. That's part of being a rule of law society too.
Okay, but if we have potentially MPs still sitting in Parliament who this committee says wittingly participated with foreign governments to undermine our elections, does that not undermine Canadian confidence in our Parliament and in our elections?
No, before we watch her squirm under whatever next lie she's going to spit out there. This is interesting that legacy media has picked up on this wittingly term. This is going to be a sore spot for the political class, because what this does is it establishes and clarifies we are no longer crazy. What we are talking about is real. It is genuine. It is not theory. These are conspiracies. These are legitimate conspiracies. And it's now confirmed that a bunch of politicians have wittingly, which means knowingly participated and gone along with it. Now, the interesting thing about this is what about the ones that were the useful idiots, unwittingly but went along with it? Ignorance is no excuse or escape from the law, or it's not supposed to be. but here these guys are attempting to rewrite some new tools. Well, we'll let her explain her lie.
I think Canadians recognize how lucky we are to be Canadian and how strong our democracy is. I think Canadians are smart and they recognize there is a very real threat. I think in the work of this committee, in the measures, the new and enhanced authorities our government has put in place, I think Canadians see that our government takes this threat seriously and is going to continue to act. And I do want to emphasize, I see this as not a partisan issue at all. I see this as an issue of the core national interest and the core strength of Canada's democracy. That is how our government is going to act.
So now there's a couple of things that she said there. That's why I pulled this up and I wanted to unpack this, and it kind of ties into Nikki's comment here. Democracy is a lie. Democracy is ruled by the mob. Whoever has the loudest, biggest, baddest, worst mob rules. That's the essence of democracy. That's the distinguishing factor between the United States and their Constitution, ruled by the rule of law. We have ruled by democracy. So whoever controls, whichever mob or syndicate controls the levers in the establishment, the system of governments, they can basically make the rules as they go. And this is exactly what we have been seeing in Canada over decades. But so from her perspective, from the syndicate's perspective, everybody in their camp 100% believes their democracy is working fine. Their syndicate is winning. So when Capone was, his syndicate was the biggest, baddest one in Chicago, he made the law, right? And everybody loved him as long as they were on his side. So this is a buttering up and gaslighting, pretending like they have a solution, they have an answer, and they take this absolutely seriously. But of course, they have to say these things. But what we're going to keep drilling into here on this platform is exposing and sharing how these guys only want to look at their selective, narrow window of what they deem as foreign influence and meddling. And where we started the show off, right from the first story of the show, is foreign influence and meddling. And we have to not accept them attempting now to put us in our place because we are discontented with the foreign meddling. We cannot allow meat muppets like Chrystia Freeland to get out there and go and talk down to us and scold us in broken language like we are a child about to be punished for our insolence and ignorance. That posturing needs to be laughed at and mocked and called out. No, we don't trust monsters like that anymore, and we need to continue to be vocal about exactly those kinds of things. And this is going to be cycling. We saw an article last week. I meant to get that up, where they said that there was an 800% increase in abuse of elected MPs and officials. Well, what do you expect? We're going to break out another CBC clip here for two minutes or so, and where they're realizing that there's a real problem here. And so here's the situation with the legacy media. These guys know that the tides are turning and that Trudeau is going to be gone. So they are desperate to interject as much news as they can without getting spanked by the dictator. So they're scrambling. They're trying to find enough truth so that they can earn a little bit of trust back. So every once in a while, they're going to put out something that spits a little bit of truth, but they're also going to do that in order to leverage the sway, the direction of attention. So we'll start.
Than anything we've seen so far.
The Prime Minister.
I forgot to hit a button. Let me restart that.
Foreign interference is a burning issue on Parliament Hill. Now a new report is exposing extensive attempts to meddle.
There's more alarming information in it than anything that we've seen so far.
The Prime Minister called for this report last year after leaked intelligence documents revealed incidents of foreign interference and sparked controversy. He tasked a committee of parliamentarians to investigate.
They all already have top secret clearances, so they can review the activities of our national security and intelligence agencies.
After
If you watch Mr. Sunshine Baby, he was covering these hearings, and they are such a scam of obfuscation, gaslighting, anything that they can do to derail or hinder or get in the way of the process. It is absolutely obscene how these guys sit there straight-faced mocking the intelligence of Canadians and the investigation they're there to answer to. It's absolutely disgusting.
reviewing thousands of intelligence documents, the committee found troubling evidence that some parliamentarians are semi-witting or witting participants in the efforts of foreign states to interfere in our politics.
But they won't add in there who. Like, they won't distinguish or differentiate between, is it CCP of China? Is it World Economic Forum? Is it the United Nations? Is it the IMF? Is it the US of A? Who's interfering in our countries? I mean, we know. We see it. We see the totalitarianism coming, and we've got the policy, but they're pretending like again, this is only one bad actor.
Including examples of elected officials accepting funds or benefits from foreign missions or their proxies,
Doesn't sound like anything the World Economic Forum Fourth Reich does it?
giving foreign diplomatic officials privileged information, even providing information learned in confidence to a known intelligence officer of a foreign state.
All of the kind of activity that would go with straight out spying on behalf of a foreign power.
Justin Trudeau has said his government has been seized with the issue, but the report says it's been slow to act, pointing to the expulsion of Chinese diplomat Zhao Wei. The committee suggests the government dismissed earlier warnings from Canada's spy agency and only acted after it was leaked publicly.
I think the mantra is too slow, too slow, too slow.
I would disagree with both those assertions.
The public safety minister disputes some of the findings, explaining intelligence reports can't give a full picture.
Each bit of information is a piece of the puzzle, but to get an accurate picture of all the circumstances, you need more than a few pieces of the puzzle.
Actually, this report mentions China a lot, but also highlights India's attempts to meddle.
Yeah, Ian, this report's heavily redacted, but 3 points stand out. It suggests there is intelligence that some MPs may have worked to influence colleagues on India's behalf. There are allegations that proxies transferred funds from India to Canadian politicians at all levels of government in return for political favors, and it claims that India interfered in an unspecified Conservative leadership race. Tonight, the Conservative Party says this is the first time they've ever heard that, and they weren't warned by CSIS.
So the whole thing there is literally targeting their political enemies. They are doing everything that they can to keep us from looking at the World Economic Forum, the WHO, and their pandemic treaty, and the United Nations and the policies or the organizations that drive those. So they're accusing only a couple of foreign bodies and entities and countries of participating in this, but yet they're not even beginning to look at the ones that are actually the ones taking control over all of the institutions, all of the infrastructure, all of the industry. And this we have to keep building on this. We cannot leave it as just these singular entities that they want to point the fingers on, because this is serious, and so we need to know which politicians, witting and unwitting, who are involved, who are taking money from the lobbyists, from the NGOs, from the nonprofits, from the United Nations, from the World Economic Forum, besides just Trudeau, from the pharma companies, every one of these guys, like Eva Chipiuk, if you don't know her, she's a lawyer based out of Edmonton, big part of the National Citizens Inquirer. She was the one that was the first one to question Trudeau in the emergency measures inquiry. But, she's right. We have some serious cleaning up to do, and criminal charges should be on the table. The situation has escalated to the point where she's not sure what other measures would effectively stop this blatant regard for the rule of law and disrespect of public office, breach of duty to the people of Canada. An unknown number of federal politicians are knowingly working with hostile countries to interfere in Canada's democracy. And she's 100% on point with that. My question, and why I'm going to keep harping on all of this, is we need to be looking at all of the agencies, all of the people that are meddling in Canada and taking advantage of, because this is the essence, the core root of all of the robbery, all of the money, like Nikki says up here, I'm sure they're giving her money away. Absolutely. They are giving billions and billions and billions of our dollars away. And I'm going to bring up a next one on that, actually. We'll cover this one. This is the Auditor General report findings, highlights findings of massive fraud, corruption, and conflict of interest. You don't say. After 9 years, you don't say. When awarding contracts to companies like McKinsey & Co., you've heard that name on here a time or two before, and Sustainable Technology Canada, the sum of hundreds of millions over the last 10 years. We're going to catch this little clip.
Thank you for joining me today. That's the findings of three
Maybe.
reports that my office released this morning. I will begin with our audit of professional services contracts. It looked at whether federal contracts awarded to McKinsey & Company between 2011 and 2023 complied with applicable policies and provided Canadians with value for money spent. These contracts spanned 20 federal organizations, including 10 Crown corporations. The total value of contracts awarded to McKinsey & Company during the period we reviewed totaled $209 million, of which about $200 million was spent. We found that organizations awarding the contracts showed a frequent disregard for federal contracting and procurement policies and guidance. We also found that each organization's own practices often did not demonstrate value for money. The extent of non-compliance and risks to value for money varied across organizations. For example, in 10 of the 28 contracts that were awarded through a competitive process, we found that bid evaluations did not include enough information to support the selection of McKinsey & Company as the winning bidder. I am also very concerned by breakdowns in the Foundation's governance. La Fondation n'a pas toujours respecté.
The Foundation was not always following conflict of interest policies, and it failed to comply with the Canada Foundation for Sustainable Development Technology Act. With respect to conflicts of interest, the Foundation did not have an effective system to maintain its conflict of interest disclosures and related actions. Its own records show that in 90 cases, conflict of interest policies were not followed. These 90 cases were connected to approval decisions that awarded projects worth nearly $76 million in funding. Like all organizations funded by Canadian taxpayers, Sustainable Development Technology Canada has a responsibility to conduct its business in a manner that is transparent, accountable, and compliant with legislation.
So is any of that surprising, guys, whatsoever? So there's $200 million, again, pissed into the wind, no record of it, no conflict of interest policies, nothing, no maintenance, oversight, or governance. But hey, you guys can just afford another $200 million to go into cronies' pockets, right? It's just we all can. It doesn't we'll never notice, right? But that's I wonder, is that including 50 million for Lavalin scandal, 900 million for the We Charity scandal, 60 million for the Arrive Cam scandal, $2 billion for stocks in a company that doesn't even exist, phony infrastructure. Like, this is just never ending robbery. This isn't even bad politics at this point, guys. This is straight up crime sprees. And then they want to blame us for not trusting them. So this is I've got a bit of a longer clip here from the National Post. I wasn't going to really play the whole thing, but I think I should, because this is a clip that y'all can use so that when people want to spew this garbage that we are mentally ill because we don't trust and support them, these guys
Crowley, the managing director of the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, and today we're talking about a new decree from Ottawa that public servants must be in the office at least 3 days a week. This has not gone over well with the unions. They've promised us a summer of discontent here in Ottawa. And Brian, I'm curious, how do you think private sector Canadians, people who work in the private sector, are feeling about this right now?
Well, I always think a story tells us better than anything. My wife is part of a new walking group out in the community where we live. And so she went for a walk with a new group of people she never met before. And two of them were civil servants. And during the walk, they started talking about how COVID had been the best thing that had ever happened to them. They got to work from home, and, they could go and walk their dog or play with their kids, and, everything. They kept their salaries. Everything remained as it was. But there was another woman in the group who listened to this for a few minutes, and finally she just stopped dead. And she said, my husband and I lost our business because of the COVID lockdown. Yeah. We went into debt. We lost everything. And I just can't listen to this anymore. Yeah. And I think there is a lot of truth in that little vignette about how people outside the civil service regard what's happening inside the civil service. They feel that civil servants live in a bubble that's completely divorced from reality, that the idea that civil servants would, like several years after the end of the pandemic, be saying, oh, there's no reason for us to return to the office, when private sector workers are, by and large, all back to the office. I know quite well the guy who's a CEO of a manufacturing company, and he's got 25,000 employees. They're all back at work 5 days a week, yeah. Because if you're making something, you got to be there. Yeah. You can't do that over the phone from home. Yeah. And so, part of what's going on is there's this psychology in the civil service that, well, everybody's circumstances must be like ours. But the truth of the matter is that most people's circumstances are not like people who work in the civil service.
And that story was the thing that I wanted to highlight on there. That's a real world story about the disconnect between civil service and anybody else. And they have destroyed the middle class. They have destroyed manufacturing. They have destroyed all of those mom and pop business and put those into the choice of becoming limited to the big box stores, all of the ESG giants. And this is by design to move us to those companies that will rule the world through the ESG, DEI, and the devastation of anything and everything in between. So as always, guys, tomorrow when the Substack goes out, all of the links for all of these things will be in there, and people will be able to watch the whole thing in its entirety if you so choose. But there was the point there that I wanted to make out of that. But this one here is only 1:43, and I am going to play this whole one because this is going to tie into some of the rest of what we're going to be diving into, and it's going to be icky.
Facebook's independent fact checker may not be so independent after all. A US congressman has questioned the impartiality of factcheck.org, which is supposed to tackle vaccine disinformation because it's indirectly funded by jab manufacturer Johnson & Johnson.
Who pays the paychecks of the fact checkers? The vaccine fact checkers at factcheck.org, who claim to be independent, are funded by an organization that holds over $1.8 billion of stocks in a vaccine company and is run by a former director of the Centers for Disease Control.
The fact-checking account responded to the accusations by making clear its funding sources. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's one of the benefactors and holds billions in Johnson & Johnson stock. The foundation's CEO is Richard Besser, who was a former acting director of the Center for Disease Control. But factcheck.org claims there's no interference in its editorial decisions, and the foundation's views aren't necessarily reflected in its decisions. But author and liberal studies expert Michael Rechtenwald believes such connections pose risks to the public.
This is absolute collusion on the part of vaccine manufacturers having funding the fact checkers on social media. So we're actually getting to the point where people's lives are being endangered. We've lost all confidence in the social media and our mainstream media entirely. Anything that comes into contradiction with the leftist agenda is deemed misinformation. People are now not able to get information about what's best for their health, including the detriments of the vaccine.
And this
Facebook's independent fact checker may not be so independent.
And this is exactly why I fight so hard to get through the censorship and the abuse and the lies. And think about this, guys. These guys are responsible for the mass murder of millions of people. Do you think they're just going to roll over if they're not forced to and say, oops, we're sorry? I don't hold your breath on that, right? So we're going to carry on into a little bit of that with a couple of the next stories here. So this is the Telegraph out of the UK, which has finally broken the seal and are admitting that there might be some side effects. A recent study published by the British Medical Journal suggests that COVID vaccines may have contributed to up to 1 million excess deaths annually. And I believe this is based in just the UK study. This has sparked widespread discussion and calls for further research into the potential side effects and links to mortality rates. The Telegraph, a mainstream media outlet, published an article highlighting this issue, marking a shift from earlier times when such discussions were considered conspiracy theories. Experts and the public are now openly debating the safety and efficacy of the vaccines, with some expressing concerns over the significant increase in excess deaths despite the vaccine rollout. Gee, do you think how abused has anybody? Nobody got through this without being abused. Nobody was being called every name in the book, right down to murdering grandma. And so this is going to go through a real roller coaster ride here in the next 4 or 5 minutes, guys. But these are the things that Trudeau is making sure that we cannot stream. I've got 37,000 followers on Facebook that are not getting this information. They are not hearing this news. And to me, this is life-changing information that we need everybody to have. Oh, sorry. I did it again. Too many stories, too many buttons. This clip, 3 minutes, is pretty direct, but I think everybody needs to hear it.
We didn't realize what was happening early on. They kept telling us all of our patients were dying of COVID. It was not COVID that was killing any of these patients. It was the complete and total medical mismanagement of COVID. It was the remdesivir, ventilator, death, wash, rinse, repeat. This is what we were seeing over and over happen in these hospitals. And I'm far from the only nurse that can tell you this. I know that you've interviewed Nicole Siratek. She could tell you what was happening in hospitals that she was at. Nurse Erin, same thing. So it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see what has become of this.
Can I share something with you, Nicole? I thought I knew a lot. I mean, I've had name a doctor, Dr. Judy Mikovits, Dr. Brian Artis. I mean, I've literally been brought up since 14 days to flatten the curve by some of our top frontline professionals, period. Doctors, lawyers, everyone. But Nicole yesterday stunned me. You know what she said? And I want you to emphasize this point, and we're going to say it to this audience too. She said they ordered 35,000 ventilators. She goes, how come they didn't order an equal number of feeding tubes?
Interesting. That's a good point.
I was stunned by that. I'm like, that's absolutely right. And she broke it down. She said, you can't put somebody on a ventilator without a feeding tube. They're going to starve to death. They will die.
Correct.
And
they won't starve to death and die. They will be murdered.
Is an indisputable fact, is it not?
Yeah.
Wow.
I agree with her 100%. To see what was happening with, placing these patients on the ventilators. And again, they kept telling us, they have all of the nurses scared to death, telling us all of our patients are dying of COVID. Listen, if they were dying of the virus alone, why weren't we pulling bodies from homes? Why weren't we pulling bodies off of the streets? If you think about our homeless population, the only place anybody was dying was in our hospitals. And it's because they were dying of the treatments. They were dying of the treatment, the medical mismanagement of COVID. The remdesivir was poisoning people. We were shutting down their organs. We were placing them on ventilators. Then they're getting secondary bacterial infections, and they are succumbing to those. They're getting blood clots because they're not being ambulated properly. We couldn't even get doctors and PT up on the floor to ambulate patients. People were too afraid. It was mostly just the nurses. And then the doctors would either come and look through the glass windows of the ICU and take the nurse's report. They were not going in and putting their hands. But a problem that was happening that people aren't talking about enough is how we were intubating patients, not because they were in distress, but in an effort to contain the virus. They were pushing for early intubation, knowing that 80% of the patients, or even more, 80% or more of those patients that were placed on a ventilator never made it off.
And 100% of them never made it off. That's speculation, but this makes me really, 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 really angry. We were talking about this in 2021 when we first started the Doctor Talks series, and we're still trying to stop them from murdering people. And the only thing I'm envious of America is that this video can get 177,000 views down in the United States, and I'll be lucky if over the course of the next month we get 3 or 4,000 on any of our videos. So this brings up the next story. Knowing all of this, the new president of Canadian Medical Association, Josh Reimer, had this to say about what we were just talking about. This is going to make you angry.
And while I wouldn't say a lot of people knew people who had had bad outcomes with the vaccine, they'd all seen pictures of people. They weren't real people most of the time, but they looked like real people. And so they saw what looked like these young, healthy people who had had these severe outcomes. And so it felt like they knew people who had had severe outcomes from the vaccine, even though most of them were not true. Misinformation or disinformation spreads way more easily than true information because it is emotional, because it offers simple explanations. So while I have to go through and explain how mRNA works and why the mRNA doesn't hang out in your body and what spike proteins are, and you don't need any of that if you're not bothering with the truth. You can just come up with whatever simple explanation you want and you're done. It also gives people definitive answers. So when science is sort of saying, well, we think that delaying the second dose is going to be better, they're just hearing this is harmful, this is helpful, your body can do this, your body can't do this. And so you get what feels like a much more comfortable, definitive answer. And false stories just spread incredibly fast. And this has been an issue for a long time. Prior to the pandemic, there was a group of people that have been referred to as the disinformation dozen. It's literally 12 people, and they were responsible for 60% of all anti-vax material online. 12 people. I think it's a lot more than 12 now. There's a lot of money in vaccine disinformation. But those 12 people are very wealthy now and continue to do a lot of that work to generate more disinformation and make more money from what they continue to participate in.
Welcome to your new Dr. Boss in Canada. What do you think she has intended for all of the rest of us? Do you think it wouldn't have anything to do with something like this?
We are looking for heroes. Do you want to be part of the worldwide battle against COVID-19? Join our team and help protect your friends and family. We need many smart and brave people to fight this beast. Are you up for the challenge? Let's go get your armor.
This, guys, is on the Alberta Health Services website. Alberta Health Services. If you live in Alberta, I think you got a job to do. This has got to go. Danielle has gotten off of the hook an awful lot for not rectifying the crisis that she inherited. I'll leave it at that. But that's got to stop. They're coming after the kids again when every bit of evidence in the universe suggests that these things are bioweapons and they need to be stopped. They need to be stopped. These witting and unwitting idiots needs to be stopped. We're in a time where the politics will listen. We hear it all the time from Pierre Poilievre. When enough of us get noisy about something, he gets to talking about it. We've seen this time and time again. This has got to stop. He's got his campaign slogans, but we have to force the course of public opinion to make this stop and stop now. And this is unfortunately because they are the unwitting or witting idiots. We cannot tell. The left, we know they are the witting idiots, but it's the right, the conservatives that we have to guess. Are they witting or unwitting idiots to the mass murder of Canadians and people worldwide? So we're going to skip through a couple of the last bits of the stories. It's been a bit of a roller coaster on whether the WHO Pandemic Preparedness Treaty was on, it's off, it's on, it's off, it's on, it's off. Guys, follow James Roguski. The link to this will be in the Substack tomorrow as well. But this particular article is from Shabnam. She is one of the most brilliant lawyers and doctors that I've ever had the privilege of knowing. And she's written this great piece on the intimidation tactics and threats that the WHO is using to leverage and force compliance by some nation states into their preparedness treaty. Now, it came to my attention here, although I haven't got the documentation on it yet, but just in the last couple of days that up to, I think, 11 states in the United States have said, no, they're out, they're done with the WHO treaties, which is great for those states. But anytime you leave that state, chances are at this point in time you're headed into a place that does support those, so you would be obliged to partake of the quarantines and jabs and updates and whatever things the WHO would deem you needed necessary in that regard. And as we heard yesterday, Theresa Tam, unelected official from Wuhan, temporary controlling Canada Health, has pledged full support for this treaty and encourages all other nation states to get involved and supporting it like they are in Taiwan or whatever it was. But regardless, this treaty is a roller coaster shit show, and James Roguski is the guy that talks about this. But apparently, we have 10 to 18 months to demand that governments around the world reject the amendments to the treaty that was illegitimately adopted on June 1st. So there it is, guys. They know we don't want it. They know we hate it, and they are hell bent on a forever bioweapons warfare program, and they are intent on carrying on with that. So again, there's going to be lots in these articles, guys. I encourage you to find my Substack tomorrow and dig into the bits and pieces that interest you, and give some feedback on anything that you might be able to help us understand better. So now we're going to spend just a couple of minutes. I've been wanting to do a conflict special on what's going on in the Ukraine, but that's a complex story, a lot going on, and it kind of got postponed a little bit with a guest show coming up tomorrow. So I'll try and do that Thursday. I'm going to do a special on some stuff in the Ukraine, and foreign meddling and interference organization here in Canada y'all have probably never heard of before, but you're going to get introduced to it, and on Thursday, and you'll want to pray for me after I talk about that one. But this piece here, Alex is a guy that I listen to fairly regularly. He's in Greece, but he is probably one of the best geopolitical commentators and analysts anywhere that you'll find online. He speaks, and they speak in ways that people can understand without getting us into trouble. But this piece contains a lot. Some folks may remember a couple of months ago, we had former UN weapons inspector Scott Ritter on the show here, and we talked about the Ukraine situation, the conflict, diaspora here, and what we saw coming down the pipe. Well, we're in a situation here now where Zelensky is running around the planet trying to prop up his Swedish peace conference, while the other side of the world is denouncing him as an illegitimate leader. So the wheels are falling off of his peace summit at the same time as the cabal is trying to derail a St. Petersburg economic summit, where our friend Scott Ritter was going to speak at this summit in St. Petersburg to tell people there in Russia, basically, please don't send nukes to America. We want to fix it, and we, the people, give us the time to fix the cabal that's taken over our country through this illegitimate coup. So that was basically the intent, that Scott was headed to St. Petersburg to speak at this economic summit, and Joe Biden's team interrupted him on his way to Istanbul, removed him from the plane and his belongings and his passport, and have sent him back home with allegations of some pretty extreme allegations of him being a dangerous terrorist attempting to take part in a plot against Zelensky, and all kinds of nasty, nasty things. So America is sacrificing journalists and voices of integrity to the Zelensky regime just to try and keep the wheels on that lie a little bit longer. So at this point, my friend Scott, no, I know you would never do harm to yourself. You did not kill yourself, but you have now put yourself definitely in harm's way. Thank goodness thank goodness you're safer in America than you would be over there. But that is kind of a bit of the situation on the Ukraine. And the beginning of Alex's talk here, he talks about the Italian response to Zelensky's grifting, running around trying to find more weapons, more money, and their response is they don't want weapons going to bomb and kill Russians. Italy's not at war with anyone. Leave it to Macron to talk about the war. Tell Macron, do you want to start a war? Put your helmet on, put a vest on, go to Ukraine, but don't bother the Italians who want to live in peace. That was a deputy prime minister response to Macron, who is really, really desperately trying to stoke to level up the warfare on that, and I'll touch on some of that on Thursday's show. We're getting kind of down to the last couple of minutes, so I'm going to just race through a couple other real quick stories, and we'll dig more into those as time goes by. But again, foreign interference, foreign meddling, corruption, lying, all of the hallmarks of a future movie. So I hope Mr. Mocha does make a movie on this. Guys, you guys have got to get plugged in on the level of corruption by the Edmonton mayor and his family, from former imprisoned terrorist to mayor of Edmonton and a multi-million-dollar contracts. You talk about all the government sending money to syndicates and getting in bed with other crooks and whatnot. Guys, this is a story. This is a story. So I'll plug you into Mocha's stuff as well in my Substack. But this, what is this love affair between our governmental bodies and former terrorists? What is it? What is it with this love affair with terrorists and giving them your tax dollars and positions of power and influence, whether it's this guy in Edmonton or Ahmed Hussein, Trudeau's, I gotta be careful how I say these things. Cannot let frustration take away my vocabulary. That's what I'm here not to do. But guys, I absolutely get it. It is incredibly frustrating. But this is going to go a little bit long. I did go a little bit long, but I think there's a message that I came across from Neil Oliver the other day. It's 10 minutes, 12 minutes. I'll play you guys out with this, and tune in tomorrow and get the full story, the rest of the story on MAID and the impact that it has on Canadians Canada-wide. And this, I really love Neil's message here in this video, and I want to leave you guys with something that is a little bit more nourishing than just doom and gloom. So that's not what I wanted to leave you guys on that note. So listen to Neil for a minute.
Wonderful people. Before I launch into my weekly monologue / rant, I just want to give you a quick reminder to check out my patreon.com site. I'll say it again, patreon.com site. Signing up to the site is the most direct and practical way for those of you who want to show your support for the channel, for the whole channel, for all the podcasts. As a benefit, you get early access to new content. There's an exclusive question and answer video every week, which I prefer. As things stand at the moment, we owe it to ourselves to be of good cheer. I say this to you with all sincerity, fellow travellers. Be of good cheer, in the hope that we're finally witnessing the end of all that's wrong in the world. And it won't be pretty, this ending of all that's wrong. On the contrary, it will be ugly. There's no getting away from it. You have to face up to it. But it has to happen. It's a process through which we have to go. And once the ending is over, there will be, of course, a beginning, a new beginning. And we can definitely, if we are minded so to do, we can see the beginning of the ending now. And it's revealed by the fact the target of the dying last moves of the perpetrators of all that's wrong is finally our children. In the UK, the enemy, and that's my shorthand for the perpetrators of all that's wrong, In the UK, the enemy talks about bringing back national service. That's how they couch it, because, you know, people who remember watching Dad's Army and the like, and so on and so on, and who have parents or grandparents who perform national service, it's an iron fist in a velvet glove. And in the present context, on account of those who are in charge, it's the on-ramp to the motorway heading towards conscription of our children into forever wars. And we needed to see this final revelation because it reveals the enemy's ugliest face. Those who would control the world always target the children sooner or later. It's inevitable. If you're anti-human, and the perpetrators of all that's wrong are anti-human to their core, then you desire and require nothing less than the death of the family, which means the death of the children, the actual death of children. It's obvious now in every way, and if enough of us hold the line in defiance and in open contempt of all the old tricks being played one last time, we can be rid of our tribulations once and for all. It wasn't me, actually, it was Trudy. Was walking past a newsstand and she saw a headline on one of the UK papers: "National service will toughen up British teenagers to face increasingly dangerous world." It was in the Daily Express, I believe, this very week. And the Daily Express is not by any means the worst of the foul drags, but it's nonetheless illustrative of the terminal decline of the enemy. The emptiness of the adversary we face, its complete lack of any sound substance of its own, leaves it no option but to wrap itself, to cloak itself, to disguise itself with the garments of another. Since it's the antithesis of life and humanity, what it means to be human and alive, the enemy needs to pretend at all times to be something else, needs to disguise its true nature. Now, national service. A call for volunteers and service is right enough. There's nothing wrong with it when it comes from a good and honest place, when it invites the following of a good example set by benign leaders, benign shepherds. You know, where you're in circumstances that the leaders are good and dedicated to the well-being of good people, then the call for service might be positive and productive. But don't be fooled by the headlines now. What we are seeing is the antithesis of all that's good and right. The enemy hiding its anti-human nature, its anti-human reality, by seeking to imitate all that it is not and that it can never be. So see this pathetic.
All the virtue signaling and the self-righteousness and the condescension and the dismissal of others.
Terminal behavior for what it is. And as I say, thereby endeavor to be of good cheer, because before the adversary falls once and for all, it must and will manifest its very worst self. Before we can be rid of it, we have to see it clearly. And that time, that opportunity is before us now. I would say be ready for the servants of the adversary, the ventriloquists, dummies, to line up and trumpet whatever desperate nonsense is seen to be required, and urging support for that nonsense. So be ready for more headlines and be ready for more hollow, empty sock puppets taking their turn one after another behind whichever podium to pretend their master's moves are well-intentioned. As part of the increasingly desperate efforts towards diversion and distraction, there will surely be more false flag events as well, so that I predict we will see more terrible things before it's over. false flag atrocities have presaged war throughout history. Wounds deliberately self-inflicted, or else planned and executed by others and not prevented when the consequences suit evil intentions all round. Some of those false flags of the past that strike me are the sinking of the USS Maine before the Spanish-American War, the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand before the Great War, the First World War, the attack on Pearl Harbor before World War II. It's widely conceded that attack had been planned and was coming, was well known, but nothing was done to stop it. Sometimes the evil in question is committed so
Bay of Tonkin, Vietnam, weapons of mass destruction, Iraq. It's repeat, wash, rinse, repeat, exactly on that. This is some of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about again on Thursday. These false flags, these things, these deceptions, trying to lead us into exactly that again.
So as to make convenient whomever the adversary might attack next. Iraq, always and only for their own ends. At other times, likely atrocities are detected in advance, but they're allowed to happen, as I say, if the dreadful consequences might be exploited. And once you learn to spot false flags, you might join other dots to correctly identify many more, because false flags are set up again and again. Innocent people have died before, and more innocent people will die again, because false flags are tricks that work. False flags are the stock in trade of the adversary, and he will have spectacular atrocities in mind, I'm quite sure. Horrors shaped to frighten the gullible into accepting any offer of protection, even the protection of their erstwhile tormentor, which is the adversary. A bad boy did it and he ran away. That'll be the horrified headlines in the aftermath of whatever happens. And, you know, we'll be told to be safe from more of it. It's necessary to accept digital IDs, central bank digital currencies, social credit scores, even more surveillance, limiting of energy, limiting of food, limiting of travel, all for our own good. But anyone with any sense, however, will not gather in that shadow cast by the tormentor, but will choose to find the light instead. I say the adversary is falling like a tree, all but cut through at the base, finally hurt beyond survival by self-inflicted wounds. The enemy of all that's good, all that we might be and all that we might enjoy, that enemy is angry and frightened as never before on account of those wounds. And in the way of wounded predators, it's lashing out at the most vulnerable. And so, as I said at the top, it's the youngest generations that are in the crosshairs. The forever wars already being waged, and those that will come along in time, unless enough of us spot the tricks and say no to them and mean no, then those forever wars will be the inevitable destination for the children's crusade, shortly, I predict, to be called for by false prophets. The adversary we face is capable only of death and destruction. Every time the adversary gets his way, it's ordinary people that pay the price. Black, white and brown, Christian, Muslim and Jew, whoever. The intention, once more, is to set the same creeds against the same creeds, the same people against the same people. And even were the adversary to get his way once more and make more smoking rubble and more piles of dead, nothing at all will be raised in the aftermath. The adversary is incapable of creativity, incapable of positivity, of optimism, incapable of all that's life and that makes life worth living. And this is why we are surrounded by death, decline, and decay, moral decay, infrastructure decay, you name it, war and chaos, the general rendering into rubble that we see in other parts of the world. And this will keep happening until we see what is obvious and take the steps to be rid of it. Here's the thing. I say that when you get right down to it, the adversary is empty. In the end, in spite of all the chaos caused, the enemy is just piss and wind. In the end, there's nothing there. It's an empty void. I furthermore say the enemy is weaker now than it has ever been. It's more exposed than it's ever been, and therefore likely for some time to come to be more destructive and meddlesome than it has ever been. But if enough of us hold the line now, and by so doing encourage others to waken up and do likewise, then the enemy is going down.
I could not agree with him more on that. I really couldn't. Yeah, and I've been saying this for a long time. Insanity is unsustainable. These people are empty, hollow husks. All they have is the programming. And when they don't have the programming anymore, they are nothing but angry and loathsome. And they do not rule the world. And there is nothing that they despise more than us to live in love and light. That is the answer, the cure, the antiseptic, the 100% safe and effective solution to globalism is love and fortify your community. Localism, and that's the solution, guys. And but he's also right. We cannot exterminate that which we don't know, and it's going to get ugly, dirty, and nasty. And these guys are not done, and that's why we're here, so that we can get as many of us together in understanding the insanity and taking appropriate steps for our families, communities, and those that matter most to us. So that's it tonight. Went a little bit long, guys. I love you all. Stay strong, stay mighty, my fellow hostages, and put it on your bookmark for tomorrow, 6 o'clock Central. It's going to be an epic discussion with Michelle Smith as we break down our government stuck on murder and made, and take people through some of the process and the understanding and what it does to those that are left behind, which I think is something that really gets overlooked more than it should. So love y'all. Stay Canadian, stay mighty, and we will see you tomorrow.
Running in my own direction, it was fun, and I was fine.